Foreign policy is really critical to what the ACLJ does because not only do we fight domestically, we fight internationally for human rights.
A policy adopted by an administration might actually run counter to what's in the best interest of the United States.
Khamenei posted incendiary comments about Israel. He flatly predicted that Israel won't be around 25 years from now.
After 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran.
We came in and there was this thing called the JCPOA, the Iran deal. I'd worked on it when I was a member of Congress. In fact, myself and Senator Cotton discovered 2 secret side deals.
President Trump's major announcement today being watched all over the world, pulling the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposing tough new sanctions on Iran instead.
President Trump said that's crazy. It's a pathway to a nuclear weapon, and we broke away from it. And then my team and I put in place the toughest sanction in history on Iran. And the benefit for that, for Israel, was that Iran didn't have the resources to threaten them, to confront them, to put them at risk.
So in addition to our offices in Strasbourg, our efforts at The Hague in the Netherlands, we also have an office in Jerusalem.
ACLJ supports Israel at every point that we can internationally, at every international tribunal, and we actually have an office in Israel as well.
We believe this is important for the United States and for the American people to express our support for Israel, but to also stand with the Israeli people when there's warfare, when there's conflict.
I regret that this administration got off to a bad start with respect to the relationship between the United States and Israel. They are a security partner for the United States. They're an important trading partner of the United States. We built out a coalition inside of the Middle East to push back against Iran alongside of Israel. That fundamental understanding that we have, we're a Judeo-Christian nation.
Our chief counsel, Sekulow, has appeared before the ICC in an effort to prevent the International Criminal Court from interfering with the nation-state of Israel.
The state of Israel, since its founding in 1948, has never had a year when they were not being attacked, either militarily or politically, frequently attacked through the United Nations.
The American Center for Law and Justice, through our European counterpart, the European Center for Law and Justice, enjoys a very privileged status at the United Nations. We are what's called an NGO, which means a non-governmental organization. That means we have the right to be heard on the world stage on issues of international complexity and of international concern.
ACLJ has been an important voice, and it having a NGO at the UN has given them the place to message that in a way that is incredibly effective.
We were able to put together these unbelievable peace deals between Gulf state nations and Israel and the United States because they all felt strong. They felt like they had a real partner in the White House and the administration. I don't think the administration yet in history has gotten enough credit.
I mean, the threat's real. Jordan and I, we had a series of meetings. Shimon Peres, we met with Bibi Netanyahu, who was the foreign minister then. But we had to do those meetings in command centers underground or bomb shelters that were for the military, so they had all their equipment there, because that's where they were. So we went to Ashdod and Ashkelon and all these areas that were under constant barragement, and then we found ourselves in the middle of one of those barragements.
Not one of these was aimed at a military base or the police station where we're at. These are aimed at schools, they're aimed at children. So we saw the damage the rocket did last night, but I want to show you something else right behind me. This is what the Israeli government has built for many of the citizens civilians here in Sderot, and you see the damage one of those rockets can do in the middle of night in a civilian neighborhood.
Jordan and another member of our team was actually outside talking to some of our staff, and incoming rockets came. They had 14 seconds to get from where they were to another area. That rocket landed within about 50 yards or so of Jordan. We actually took pieces of the shrapnel and took it back and made it into cufflinks to remind ourselves that's what these people were living with, the Israelis, every single day.
These cufflinks have in them shells, mortar, and rocket pieces fired from Gaza. Because when Operation Cast Lead took place and we knew there was going to be actions at the ICC, I went with my son, who's also one of our senior lawyers, and a number of other of our team, to the front line. That rocket landed about 75 feet from my son. Fortunately, he was not harmed. But we took pieces of that. Those rocket mortar are with me today as a constant reminder. We're in a struggle for life and death. It is a struggle. We will win. We have no option.
It's not a right issue. It's not a left issue. It's just being correct. We should be standing with our number one ally.
The current Iranian regime denies the Iranian people their basic human rights on a daily basis. What the ACLJ is doing to hold the Iranian regime to account is truly making the world safer.
I want to know this, President Biden, why are you negotiating with a terrorist nation in trying to get back into this JCPOA with respect to the nuclear weapons? Look, the Iranians have one thing that they intend to do, and that is to get a nuclear weapon, and they're going to get it.
One of the things as a retired Army officer that I am most proud of is our work trying to get Congress to pass the Taylor Force Act. Taylor Force was a West Point grad and a student at my alma mater, Vanderbilt University. When visiting in Israel, he was killed by a Palestinian terrorist. The Palestinian Authority will pay that terrorist who committed the murder or the attempted murder, if he or she survives. They will give them a reward for their work.
The American taxpayer was actually subsidizing those heinous acts by the Palestinian Authority. We were giving funding under the guise of economic support.
We don't give money to people to use that for non-humanitarian purposes.
With Biden's international policy, he seems to embrace foreign countries more than we saw under the Trump administration.
It's a little bit ironic that the rest of the world does not think that America first should be the policy that America puts forward when every other nation of the world approaches the world negotiating table this way.
So America First was designed centrally to secure American freedom. We all knew. We swore an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend the United States of America. It didn't mean America alone.
America has always been a leader in the world, since World War II certainly, the world leader in religious liberties, in freedom of conscience, in freedom of speech, in freedom of religion, and freedom of expression.
You look at the last couple of years of the Trump administration, you had a whole reshaping of the Middle East. The Abraham Accords, unheard of. Who would have thought that all these Arab countries would be signing peace agreements with Israel? There'd be trade agreements, peace agreements, tourism agreements. Incredible. Reshape the Middle East. And then a lot of that happened because President Trump agreed to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which had been authorized since 1995. But no president, Republican or Democrat, had the guts to do it.
It was President Trump who said, I think we're obsessing over, can we get peace between Palestinians and Israelis? What about everybody else?
I spent 8 years at the United Nations, and I spent more than 2 years overseas as America's ambassador to Germany. I can tell you that the ACLJ's work at the UN, overseas with the European Court of Justice, is incredibly important.
So I saw this in my time in service, both as CI director and as Secretary of State. I watched the good work that the ACLJ was doing here in the States and all across the world, using every tool available to deliver good outcomes for the American people.